"This is not right. This is not right, and you know it, Cynthia," Chike said, his eyes shut tight as his hormones raged with excitement. He was angry at how his body was reacting, his third leg swelling and threatening to tear through his boxers. Lustful imaginations swirled in his head, and all he needed was a little push to give in completely. "Why is it not right?" Cynthia asked, leaning closer. "The last time I checked, you aren't married to my elder sister, and you're totally free as a bird to do as you please, if you ask me." She winked at him, her voice a sultry whisper. "I might not have had the chance to engage your sister properly, but this isn't right," Chike muttered, conflicted. "I'll leave it to you then," Cynthia said, pretending to be offended as she stood up. Her cleavage was now even more exposed, and the fullness of her bosom teased his gaze. Chike swallowed hard, stealing glances in spite of himself. "If it's not right, then why are you here?" Cynthia challenged, her voice sharp. "Why did you agree to meet up with me in this kind of environment, knowing fully well something could happen? Your eyes say what your lips won't. Deep down you hope something would come of this. The only thing stopping you is some undeserved guilt. Let it go. Let's have fun. Let's do what both our bodies have been craving since the first time." She rubbed his temple, leaning in close to press her face against his, feeling the rise beneath his clothing. A shiver ran through Chike's spine as he bemoaned in pleasure. "Do you still feel this isn't right?" Cynthia teased after she placed one of her olives in his mouth. She wriggled her waist around his thighs, and with one quick move, he caught her like a villain snatching his captive. Her soft, supple skin tempted him, and he couldn't resist grabbing her olive and sucking it into his mouth. "If this is what hell feels like," Chike groaned, "then I don't want to make heaven." With that, he helped Cynthia out of her clothes, leaving her unclad in her full glory. Cynthia let out a soft moan as his fingers teased her apex. They played for a while before finally giving in to the intimacy. When it was over, Chike sat in silence, wrestling with a mix of pleasure and guilt. A part of him hated the weakness he felt, but another part craved her even more. One thing was certain, Cynthia had a hold on him, a dangerous, undeniable hold, and he wasn't ready to let her go. "I have to go now. Take care of yourself," Cynthia said after dressing up. She planted a kiss on his forehead. As she bent to wear her sandals, Chike reached for her hand, pulling her back gently. "I don't know what kind of hold you have on me," he admitted, staring deep into her eyes. "But this is crazy. I want so badly to walk away from you, but I keep running back. I don't know if this is right to say, but I wouldn't mind having more of this." He kissed the side of her neck, his voice low and hungry. Cynthia smirked. She could tell he hadn't had enough. His rising bulge gave him away. "We'll meet again, anytime you want," she whispered, biting his earlobe seductively. "You know where to find me and how to reach me." Without waiting for a reply, she slipped out and left. After she was gone, Chike slowly put on his clothes, a satisfied smile creeping onto his face. There was no other way to explain how he felt except that he was pleased and dangerously addicted. Immediately Cynthia got home, she headed for the shower. She washed off the scent of their encounter and, feeling refreshed, made her way to bed. She didn't even remember to turn her phone back on. It had remained off since she'd silenced it earlier. Meanwhile, Chike lay in his own room, unable to stop thinking about what had happened between them. He had tried calling her over and over, but her line remained unreachable. He felt a pang of disappointment, but chose to sleep while reminiscing. The first time it had happened, he wasn't in his conscious state. But this second time, he was fully aware, and the attachment he now felt for Cynthia's body was unsettling. Perhaps things happened with Antonia the way they did, so I could find the right one. Chike thought to himself before finally drifting off to sleep. The following day, Chike's call was the first one Cynthia received, even before the cloth merchant's call came in. When Chike called that morning, he was elated when Cynthia picked up. He couldn't stop talking about what had happened between them the previous night. Cynthia was all smiles as he spoke. She was glad she had him wrapped around her fingers. If giving him more of her body meant gaining control over him, she was more than willing to do just that. "Let's meet at my house tonight, please," Chike pleaded over the phone. "It'll be a bit hard for me to sneak out after I return from sales, but trust me, I'll find a way, Cynthia responded. Please do. I can't wait to eat you up, Chike bragged, boasting about his strength in bed. Cynthia was momentarily lost for words as he went into details about how ready he was for the night. She let him talk, quietly entertained by his boldness. As soon as the call ended, the cloth merchant's call came in. At first, Cynthia was tempted to ignore it, but she changed her mind and picked up. The merchant expressed his desire to see her, and Cynthia told him it wouldn't be a problem, provided he could meet her where she sold her food that afternoon. She promised to wait for him after wrapping up sales for the day. When the time came, the cloth merchant showed up as promised. He was visibly happy to see her and opened his arms, expecting a hug. But Cynthia ignored the gesture and instead asked him to help her with carrying her load. Though a little disappointed, the merchant hid his feelings, deciding it was wiser to keep his cool and not rush things. He reasoned that moving too fast might annoy Cynthia. After getting everything she needed for the next day's sales, Cynthia and the cloth merchant walked hand in hand. They were chatting and laughing when Chike unexpectedly appeared. Chike hadn't planned to go out that day, but a last-minute transaction with a fellow merchant had taken him out. He was walking with his phone in hand when he spotted Cynthia with the cloth merchant. A wave of jealousy washed over him. When Cynthia saw him, she cheerfully called out his name and waved, pretending not to notice the storm cloud on his face. She wanted to provoke him, to see how he'd react, and his expression told her everything. He was seething. "The face you're making, my dear, says it all," Cynthia thought to herself, smirking as she continued her stroll with the merchant. "Your presence wasn't useless after all," she soliloquized under her breath, glancing at the unsuspecting cloth merchant, who was smiling without a clue of what was going on in her mind. When they reached a shaded spot to rest, a message popped up on Cynthia's phone. She checked it, and it nearly made her burst into laughter, though she managed to contain herself. It was from Chike. "What were you doing with another man, holding hands like that? I thought I was the only one meant for you. Please don't hurt me like this. I'll give you the love and care you deserve. Just let me be the only man in your world. Only me, my diva." Cynthia was thoroughly entertained by the fuss Chike was making over what had happened. She couldn't stop smiling. Never knew he could construct lines like this. Smart boy, she thought, blushing. Meanwhile, the cloth merchant, thinking his jokes were what had Cynthia so amused, was delighted. Before they parted ways, he gifted Cynthia a beautiful fabric he'd brought along. "You have such a lovely skin tone," he said. "I'm sure this fabric will look perfect on you." Cynthia thanked him warmly and gave him a brief hug before heading home. After arriving, she began sorting her items for the next day's sales when Chike's call came in again. Just to toy with him a little more, Cynthia decided not to pick up. As night fell and the hour Chike had mentioned arrived, Cynthia quietly left the house before her father could return. The old man had said earlier that he'd be home late or might even stay out till the next day due to a lengthy expedition. As Cynthia was sneaking out, Antonia saw her but pretended to be asleep. She had been observing her sister's suspicious movements over the past few days and concluded Cynthia was seeing someone. But Antonia decided not to call out or spoil her sister's fun, knowing their mother could wake if she did. At Chike's place, he lay heartbroken on his bed, feeling empty and restless, not expecting Cynthia to show up anymore. Then one of his servants arrived to inform him that someone was at the gate. The moment the servant described the visitor, Chike knew it was Cynthia. "Let her in immediately," he ordered. Cynthia stepped in with a playful smile. "Guess you've been waiting for me," she teased as Chike practically threw himself at her. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting," he replied, planting a kiss around her bosom. "Who was he?" Chike asked amidst a kiss. "Who?" Cynthia feigned ignorance. "Come on, you know who I'm talking about. The man I saw you with on the road to the market." "Who is he?" "Why don't you let us enjoy this moment and stop ruining it with your questions?" Cynthia replied coolly. "We're here for fun, aren't we? No attachments, no strings. It's not like this is more than the pleasure we get from pleasing each other's fantasies." "I don't know what you feel, Cynthia, but what I feel is beyond the pleasures of intimacy. I want you for myself, only for myself." "Don't you think that's selfish?" especially if you don't want any commitments beyond having me in your bed." Cynthia winked at him. "Then let's make it official," Chike said, his lips moving against her skin. "You're my woman from now on. We can have love dates, build something more. This isn't just about fantasies anymore. And I promise you, I'll be enough for you." Cynthia chuckled, half in awe of his touch, half amused by his words. "The things you say," she breathed. "What do you think? Do you find the idea of being my woman appealing? Like, should I be jumping up right now? Screaming my head off because you just offered me a life-changing proposal?" She burst into laughter. "Come on, Cynthia, don't ruin this moment," Chike pleaded, pulling her close, his intense gaze almost making her heart leap out of her chest. "It's the same thing I'm begging you not to do," she teased, gripping his desire. Chike trailed kisses across her skin, and soon enough, they gave in to their desires once again. Afterwards, Chike had a hard time letting her leave, but he didn't have a choice. When Cynthia returned home, her father was still absent, as he had foretold earlier. It was extremely late, and she guessed he wouldn't return until the next day. As Cynthia carefully tiptoed into the house, her mother, lying awake in the dark, caught her leg as she tried to pass by. Though blind, the old woman's instincts were sharp. "I might be blind, but I'm not deaf or too dull to notice your absence. Where have you been, Cynthia?" Cynthia's heart raced. She hadn't prepared for this. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Then, after taking a deep breath, she was about to lie when Antonia appeared. Cynthia tensed, expecting her sister to betray her, but to her surprise, Antonia stepped forward. "Mama, it's my fault," Antonia said softly. "I sent her out on an errand to one of my customers. I wasn't feeling well and I should have told you when you woke up, but I was too weak and distracted. The customer called late and Cynthia was the only one I could send. I guess she had trouble with the directions, that's why she returned this late. I'm sorry, Mama." Cynthia glanced at her sister in disbelief and patted her shoulder lightly. "You should have just said that when I asked you," their mother sighed. "All right then, you can go." Cynthia let out a sigh of relief and hurried into her room. Later that night, when Antonia came into the room, Cynthia couldn't hold it in. "Why did you cover for me?" she asked. "I've been on edge ever since." Antonia smiled faintly. "Why are you scared of me covering for you? Aren't you still my little sister?" Cynthia grinned, stammering, "Yeah, but it's fine. I didn't do it because I expect anything in return. I just didn't want you to get into trouble. I know you've got a lover in town. Don't ask me how I know. It's obvious. All I'll say is this. Be careful, Cynthia. Don't bring shame on this family. And I hope whoever you're sneaking out for is worth the risk." "Oops," Cynthia chuckled, flashing a mischievous smile. She hadn't realized Antonia had noticed her movements, though she was sure her sister didn't know who it was. Antonia didn't press for details. Instead, she offered Cynthia some relationship advice before leaving the room. She knew time would eventually reveal the mystery man. The kindness in Antonia's heart softened Cynthia a little, but her bitterness and obsession with control had long numbed her conscience. She simply chalked it up to Antonia feeling indebted for that incident long ago when Cynthia saved her life. Cynthia continued her secret affair with Chike, meeting him at intervals and also making regular visits to the herbalist. Months passed. Then one day, after persistent nausea and weakness, Cynthia went for a checkup at a small clinic in town. The nurse's words nearly made her faint. She was pregnant. At first, Cynthia was thrilled. She imagined how helpless Chike would be when she told him. She feared he might deny the child, but to her shock, he didn't. Chike accepted the pregnancy without hesitation, and to everyone's disbelief, showed up at Cynthia's family home with his people, seeking her hand in marriage. The entire household descended into chaos when they arrived. Their father, furious, almost chased them away. It wasn't until Cynthia burst into tears and confessed to being pregnant with Chike's child that things calmed down. Dumbfounded was an understatement. Antonia felt utterly broken-hearted. She had clung to a fragile hope of mending things between herself and Chike once she found the strength to return to her social life. The trauma she'd suffered had taken a toll on her, and though it was behind her now, she'd chosen to rest and heal before stepping out again. But why would Cynthia and Chike betray me like this? Antonia muttered to herself, pacing her room. The feeling of disgust that washed over her as Chike held Cynthia and lifted her from the floor made it almost impossible to restrain herself from striking him. Every part of her wanted to vent, to scream, to curse, to hit. But what would it change? Her sister was carrying his child, and any chance of rekindling what they had was dead. Soon after, a date was fixed for the traditional wedding. Cynthia's father promised to get back to Chike's family with the marriage list. When Chike left that evening, Antonia felt hollow. She staggered into her room, her chest heavy with grief. How could you? Their mother's voice broke through the silence as she confronted Cynthia. I never had eyes for Chike, Cynthia began, her face downcast. I was happy for him and my sister, truly. But fate? Fate has a way of playing cruel tricks. It started when I went to console him after what happened with Antonia. One visit led to another, and before I knew it, it happened. I know there's no excuse, but the deed is done. Her countenance was sober, but no amount of feigned remorse could ease the tension in the room. The only way you could console a man was by opening your legs, their father cut in coldly. No other man in this town appealed to you? It had to be the one who wanted your sister? Father, please. Cynthia dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. If not for the fact that you're carrying my first grandchild, I'd have asked you to take that thing out of your womb this instant. He spat, storming off, his hunting gear slung over his shoulder. He was preparing to leave for a hunt when Chike and his people had shown up earlier. Antonia, meanwhile, wept. Days blurred into weeks. She blamed fate, cursed her bad luck, and nursed a pain so deep, words couldn't touch it. Yet, reality was cruel. The traditional wedding date drew near, and Chike was already delivering the items on the marriage list. A few days before the ceremony, Chike sought Antonia out. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I beg you, let it go. We're going to be family now. Don't hold this against us forever, he said. Antonia, feeling trapped, had no choice but to nod and wish them well. What was left for her anyway? It wasn't as if she could turn back time. On the traditional wedding day, Antonia fought to hold back tears when her sister was pronounced Chike's wife. Her father, noticing the pain written on her face, signaled for her to compose herself. She did. Barely. The ceremony was concluded, and Cynthia became Chike's wife in the eyes of tradition after the bride price and dues were paid. The news hit the cloth merchant Cynthia had been stringing along like a slap. He barely had time to process it. He was left sulking and heartbroken, another casualty of Cynthia's deceit. It shook the town too. Those who knew Chike's long-standing affection for Antonia whispered behind closed doors. Some accused Cynthia of diabolical means. Rumors spread that she'd harbored feelings for Chike long before this and might have been behind Antonia's misfortunes. But gossip was just that, gossip. What was done was done. No one could rewrite it. As time passed, tongues wagged less. Hearts that had been broken slowly began to heal. Months later, Cynthia gave birth to twin boys. One the spitting image of her, the other a mirror of Chike. The news softened the hearts of their parents, and joy returned, if only momentarily. Antonia was busy in the market when her mother called to share the news. She packed up early and made her way to the midwife's room. The moment Antonia laid eyes on those babies, a wave of sorrow washed over her. That should have been her place, her rightful place. Their mother, sensing her grief in the way her voice quivered and how her hands trembled while she admired the newborns, pulled her into a hug. Some pains weren't seen, only felt. My daughter, her mother whispered gently. It's time to heal. Open your heart again. Give love a chance. A few weeks later, Antonia finally decided to heed her mother's advice. It was hard to accept that Chike was gone for good, but what choice did she have? She couldn't keep blaming others or fate for her misfortunes. The least she could do was let go of bitterness, wish them well, and move on. Deep down, Antonia couldn't forget that Cynthia had once saved her life. That alone was enough reason to forgive, even if her heart still bled. One Friday evening, while returning from the market square after a busy day of sales, Antonia crossed paths with the prince and his friend, the cloth merchant. The two were often seen around town together. When Antonia spotted the prince, she greeted politely and continued on her way. But barely a step ahead, the cloth merchant called her back. This fell from you. He raised a necklace from the ground. Antonia touched her neckline and smiled. "No, it's not mine. Mine's right here." As she smiled, something stirred in the prince's heart. Warmth spread through him. He found himself staring into her eyes, captivated. "Pardon me," the prince said. "Which household are you from?" Antonia, shy and guarded, didn't want to reveal her home, fearing old stories would resurface. She brushed his question aside with a polite smile and went on her way. The prince stood, spellbound by her beauty and intrigued by her reluctance. It puzzled him that she wouldn't answer such a simple question. The cloth merchant, still nursing his heartbreak over Cynthia, barely noticed Antonia's radiance. Though he'd glimpsed her at the traditional wedding, he hadn't recognized her then. That day, Antonia's makeup and attire had made her almost unrecognizable. As the prince continued talking about the mysterious girl, the cloth merchant merely nodded, lost in thought. The prince had to nudge him back to reality. After roaming town for a while longer, they headed back to the palace. That evening, the prince confided in one of the palace guards, describing the lady who had struck a chord in his heart. He detailed her appearance, the basket of fabrics she carried, and her bright, unforgettable smile. "I want to know who she is," the prince said. "Find out what you can. Anything. I must see her again." Though the description was vague, the guard promised to do his best. The next day, armed with what little information he had, the guard set off for the market square. He'd been given enough money to patronize her stall should he find her. The market was crowded, with many young women selling fabrics, but none fit the prince's description. Until, by sheer luck, Antonia arrived, carrying a basket of fabrics. Her smile was as radiant as the prince had described, and as she set down her basket, her hairstyle was revealed. The guard knew instantly this was her. He approached, purchasing several expensive fabrics, engaging her in friendly conversation. He asked for her name, and this time, Antonia told him. Before leaving, the guard managed to exchange contact details with her, promising to return for more fabrics soon. When he returned to the palace, the guard was all smiles. The prince wasn't interested in the fabrics. His interest lay solely in Antonia. He told the guard to keep the purchases for himself and eagerly took the contact information. Later that evening, as planned, the prince called Antonia. "Good evening, beautiful fabric seller," he teased gently. "If you don't mind, I'd love to meet with you today. I want to discuss your fabrics. They're of excellent quality. I might be able to market them to a few of my friends, but only if you promise me a discount." He laughed softly on the line. Antonia hesitated. Something about the voice felt familiar, and she wasn't sure she wanted to meet. "I'll think about it," she replied. When she mentioned the call to her mother, the older woman chuckled. "My dear, maybe that young man isn't after your fabrics. Maybe he's after your heart." Antonia rolled her eyes, unconvinced, but her mother urged her to go. "Go and have fun. If you feel uncomfortable, let him know. Not everyone's a cheeky." Reluctantly, Antonia agreed. She picked out a simple yet flattering dress and applied light makeup as her mother had advised. "You're healing, my daughter. Loosen up a little. Not everyone with good intentions should pass you by." Antonia smiled at her mother's words. Maybe it was time. When she arrived at the meeting spot, Antonia's jaw dropped in shock. There, waiting, was the prince himself. "You," she exclaimed, instinctively turning to walk away. But before she could leave, the prince reached out, gently catching her by the waist. "Wait," he said softly, his voice sincere. "Don't go. You look so beautiful, even when you're annoyed." The prince said softly, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. Antonia sighed, exhaling the heaviness in her chest. "With all due respect, my prince, I don't appreciate dirty games. You went to ridiculous lengths just to make me talk to you, and it wasn't necessary. Now please, let me go. I have no wish to disrespect royalty." She tried to leave, but the prince gently held her wrist. When she took a step forward, he let go, and then, to her shock, went down on one knee. "Antonia, I'm sorry," he said earnestly. "I truly am. I badly needed to see you again. That day at the market, when I saw you with your basket, something inside me shifted. I don't know how else to explain it, but you struck a part of me I didn't know was there." Before he could say more, Antonia raised a hand, halting him. "Look, there's nothing special about me, and I'm sorry to disappoint you, but your words don't move me." Besides, the day you claimed to have first seen me wasn't your first. You once passed by my compound with your guards." The prince blinked, embarrassed. "Oh, my bad," he chuckled nervously. "Maybe I was too overwhelmed to notice then, but I swear, it was at the market that you truly caught my attention." Antonia sighed, unsure why she was still standing there. "All right, fine." The prince gestured to a nearby bench. "Can we sit? Just for a moment." After a moment's hesitation, Antonia sat down, grudgingly. "So, why exactly did you want to see me?" The prince cleared his throat, trying to steady his heartbeat. "I don't mean to be forward, but I was hoping we could build something beautiful between us." "Something beautiful like what?" Antonia interjected. "Like a relationship," the prince said plainly, his face steady and sincere. Antonia stood immediately. "A relationship? You barely know me. You don't even know if I'm good enough to match your status. Class, money, none of that matters to me," the prince said, standing too. "What I want is you, just your heart, nothing else." Antonia let out a bitter laugh. "It's easy to say those things, Your Highness, but you don't know what you're asking for. I have a past, one that still haunts me and stains my name. I'm sure you wouldn't want to associate yourself with me once you hear it." The prince frowned, curiosity sparking in his eyes. "A past? What past?" Antonia hesitated. "You once asked me about my family, right?" "Yes, and?" For a moment Antonia was silent, then she spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm from the household you've heard about, the one whose daughter was mocked and ridiculed for messing up her life. That was me." The prince's face froze as recognition dawned. "Wait, you're the lady everyone talked about? The one who—" Antonia's eyes filled with tears. "That's why I don't take proposals seriously. I lost customers, I lost friends, people avoided me like a plague. Even now, I get anxious when someone stares at me for too long. I didn't mean to scare you, but I needed you to know before you start building castles in the air." For a long moment, the prince was quiet, thinking. Then he spoke. "Well, it doesn't change a thing." Antonia's head snapped up. "What did you just say?" "I said, it doesn't change anything. You've overcome it, haven't you? It's in the past, and the past should stay where it belongs. I'm not here for rumors or village gossip. I'm here because you moved my heart, Antonia." Antonia stared at him, stunned. "I can't be hearing this right." "You heard me," the prince smiled. "Your past remains your past. If you've healed, then let it stay buried. Don't let it ruin the chance for something real. Just give me a chance." Antonia looked away, blinking back tears. I'll need time to think about it." "Take all the time you need," the prince replied softly. "I'll wait." A week later, Antonia accepted the prince's proposal. Though fear gripped her heart, fear of not being good enough, of her past being dragged out once more, it was her mother's words that finally cleared the clouds in her mind. "Do what makes you happy, my child," her mother had told her. "Your past doesn't own you." And with that, Antonia agreed to be the prince's beloved. They began to see each other often. The prince would secretly arrange beautiful places where they could meet, away from prying eyes. Together they laughed, shared stories, and uncovered little secrets about each other. But good news in a small town never stays hidden for long. Months later, their relationship became public knowledge, and as expected, the town began to talk. Antonia's old scandal resurfaced as like a stubborn stain whispered from mouth to mouth, reaching places she never imagined. The prince wasn't spared either. Friends, nobles, and even his own parents threw harsh words at him. "A prince should never stoop so low. She'll tarnish your name. Have you forgotten what they called her in town?" But the prince stood firm. No insult, no sneer, no threat could sway him. He went as far as warning anyone who dared to speak ill of Antonia in his presence, dealing with them harshly through his words and actions. On their outings, he engaged 2 trusted guards to accompany them, knowing how the hurtful words chipped away at Antonia's self-esteem. He was determined to shield her, heart and soul. Meanwhile, far away in the city, Cynthia, who had recently given birth to twins, heard about the affair through town gossip. A neighbor, a market woman, and a distant family friend had all called her attention to it. 3 months after her delivery, Chike decided it was time for Cynthia to rest and create new memories in the city with their twins. They left, accompanied by 2 servants, while others stayed behind to oversee their affairs. When Cynthia confirmed the rumor through her sister, she was shattered. The thought of Antonia marrying into royalty gnawed at her peace. How can she be in a position of authority ahead of me? The thought alone made her skin crawl. Her discomposure was so evident that Chike, upon noticing her silence, grew worried. "What's wrong, my lovely wife?" he asked, planting a soft kiss on her cheek. Cynthia forced a smile and shook her head. "It's nothing, my love. I'm just exhausted from all the moving around." She returned his kiss and retreated to the bedroom. Inside, her mind spiraled with bitter thoughts. She began to map out ways to destroy the relationship. And then it struck her: Antonia's past. That scandal would be her perfect weapon. What Cynthia didn't know was that Antonia had long told the prince everything. The rumors had cooled since the prince openly defended her and refused to entertain any gossip. Still, Cynthia went ahead. She used the number she had cleverly obtained from the cloth merchant's phone months before, during a staged apology and friendly conversation. Pretending to make peace, she'd convinced him to hand over his phone, claiming she wanted to see some pictures. That was when she memorized the prince's number. Late that night, she sent a message from a private number. The message was cruel. It dredged up Antonia's old scandal, called her every name imaginable, and ended with a venomous warning: "She will bring nothing but ruin to your name and reputation." When the prince received it the next morning, he was stunned, not because he was unaware of Antonia's past, but because of the vile hatred seething through every word. It wasn't a mere insult, it was venom. He didn't show Antonia. He didn't delete it either. He kept it, wary of the darkness lurking behind those words. Back in the city, Cynthia waited eagerly for updates from her informant. But a day passed, then a week. Nothing. No scandal, no heartbreak, no victory. Her anxiety deepened. Did I memorize the wrong number? Did the message even get to him? But she couldn't contact the cloth merchant again without raising suspicions. She had to find another way. This time, her plot darkened. Cynthia sought out the old herbalist she once knew. After giving him what he wanted, her body, she made her request. "I need a substance, one that will cripple my sister." The herbalist, stunned by her wickedness, scolded her for abandoning the treatment he once gave her sister. Yet even he was shaken by the depth of her hatred. The herbalist had long suspected Cynthia's deceitful nature. When she'd first come to him, pretending to care for her sister's welfare, he had seen through the pretense. That was why he never gave her the full cure for Antonia's ailment. He knew deep down that Cynthia was capable of throwing it away if she learned it would save her sister. So, he'd given her a temporary remedy and instructed her to return for the complete one, a request he knew she would never fulfill. Now, as Cynthia stood before him again, requesting a substance that would cripple her own sister, the herbalist wrestled with his conscience. For a brief moment, he thought of refusing, but after they laid together in the secrecy of his shrine, his resolve crumbled. He knew too well the danger of rejecting a desperate woman with a heart blackened by envy. If he turned her away, she would find another, and perhaps expose him. Reluctantly, he agreed. Before handing her the dark liquid sealed in a small calabash, he warned her in a low, grave voice. "Listen to me carefully, Cynthia. This substance must not remain in your possession beyond 7 days. If you fail to use it by then, calamities will befall you and yours. It does not forgive." Cynthia nodded, barely listening, too pleased with herself for gaining what she believed was the key to destroying Antonia. But fate had other plans. Just as Cynthia was preparing to leave for her parents' house to set her wicked plan in motion, disaster struck. Chike, her husband, fell gravely ill. It came without warning, a sudden collapse, high fever, and unrelenting seizures. The doctors were baffled, unable to find a cause. For days, Cynthia's world turned upside down. She was too overwhelmed to think of anything else. The vial of poison lay forgotten in a corner of her room. When Chike was finally discharged from the hospital, 9 days had passed since Cynthia collected the substance. The herbalist's warning returned to her memory like a haunting echo, and dread crawled up her spine. 7 days, or calamity. Panic gripped her, but she dared not throw the substance away carelessly, for fear that its curse would still find her. That night, as Cynthia lay beside her recovering husband, a sharp, unnatural cry jolted her from sleep. It came from the cot where her twins slept. One of them, her son, screamed with a voice far too deep and tortured for a baby. She rushed over in terror. The child's face had turned pale, ghostly, his skin cold to the touch. His tiny eyes stared blankly into space. Before Cynthia could lift the child properly or utter a word of prayer, the boy gave one final gasp and went still in her arms. A heavy, unnatural silence filled the room. The child was dead. Cynthia let out a blood-curdling scream. She wailed, shaking the lifeless body, calling his name over and over, but it was too late. The consequence she had been warned of had found its way into her home, and the vial still sat untouched in her room. Cynthia wept bitterly as she cradled the cold body of her son. Consumed by grief and guilt, she went straight to the herbalist's shrine to tell him what had happened. The old man, seated before his smoldering pot of herbs, regarded her with a knowing look. "I warned you," he muttered, shaking his head. Cynthia broke down into fresh sobs. "If I had known, I would have thrown it away when those 7 days passed," she wailed. The herbalist let out a dry laugh. "And cause a disaster even greater than what you've suffered. Woman, you play with forces you do not understand." Before Cynthia left that evening, the herbalist, in spite of his concern over the child's death, took advantage of her grief, cajoled her once again into his bed. Cynthia, desperate for some form of consolation, gave in. The following morning, she returned to his shrine with the dangerous substance, carefully tied in a black nylon as instructed, and handed it over with her left hand. The herbalist chanted incantations, his voice rising in guttural whispers as he tossed the packet into a calabash filled with dark liquid. "That's all," he said. "So, no more evil will befall me or my family?" Cynthia asked anxiously. He nodded solemnly. Relieved, Cynthia promised to do him good on her next visit. But as the days passed without incident, and Chike's health improved, Cynthia's bitterness resurfaced. In her heart, she blamed Antonia for her son's death, convinced that as long as her sister lived, she would never know peace. When Antonia came visiting days later with their parents to offer condolence, Cynthia's hatred intensified. Her fury boiled when the prince arrived, openly announcing his intentions to marry Antonia, holding her hand as they left. Cynthia seethed. "If I'm not happy, neither will she," she swore to herself. Chike mourned his son deeply. He clung to the surviving twin, his grief gnawing at him. And though Cynthia seemed to be coping, her heart grew darker. Having been warned by the herbalist never to involve him again, Cynthia decided to take matters into her own hands. She traveled to a distant town to buy a potent rat poison, deadly to humans in high doses, though it worked slowly. Feigning warmth, Cynthia told Chike she wanted to spend a week at her family's house. He agreed, unaware of the malice behind her request. At home, Cynthia wasted no time. The next day, she prepared a meal, lacing a portion meant for Antonia with a heavy dose of poison. But fate intervened. Their aging mother, guided by her walking stick, swapped the plates unknowingly after her husband pointed out the portion on the table. That night, Cynthia lay in bed, smug and satisfied, believing her plan would soon take effect. She counted the days eagerly. But it was her mother who fell ill 2 days later, weak, breathless, clutching her chest until death claimed her in her sleep. The realization crushed Cynthia. She had failed again. Her mother's tragic death fueled Cynthia's hatred all the more. At the burial, while others wept in grief, Cynthia's heart plotted revenge. Determined to end both Antonia and the prince's lives, Cynthia hired notorious men from a nearby town, promising them a hefty sum. But fortune favored the innocent. A young man whose mother had once been saved by the prince's generosity overheard the plot from a nearby tree. He recorded the conversation and took photos. Before the plan could be executed, the evidence reached Antonia, the prince, and a cloth merchant friend. Stunned, they involved the authorities. Cynthia's involvement was exposed, from the incriminating conversations to her order for assassination. The hired men were arrested swiftly. Chike refused to believe the accusations until the damning evidence was laid bare before him. Shocked and broken, he withdrew into himself. Cynthia was taken into custody. But even in the cell, her torment continued. Night after night, her mother's ghost visited her, demanding confessions. Cynthia would yank her hair, scream, and plead for the apparitions to leave her be. On the 5th day, after another terrifying dream, the warder informed her of visitors. Annoyed by her erratic behavior, he struck her. That blow seemed to unearth a floodgate of confessions. Cynthia confessed everything: her jealousy, her attempts on Antonia's life, her mother's accidental poisoning, the child she lost due to her wickedness, and the conspiracies she'd woven. After her confession, madness overtook her. Cynthia was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. The prince and Antonia married shortly after, choosing to move forward in spite of the deep wounds left behind. The cloth merchant relocated to another town to escape the dark memories. The herbalist, who never heard from Cynthia again, mourned her disappearance for a while, then returned to his trade. Chike, shattered by betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, remained single. He raised his surviving son alone, refusing to let another woman close to his heart. The scars Cynthia left would take a lifetime to fade. In the end, the truth surfaced, but with it came pain, broken hearts, and wounds that would take years to heal.